The air of Nixara Prime hit like the exhaust of a dying star metal. Ozone. And the sweet sting of alien spice. Captain Cole Payne had spent 15 years fighting worlds like this. Yet peace had brought him back as a glorified courier. The Vidian peace treaty was barely 3 months old, too fragile for celebration. Too raw for trust. Stay close. Argo. The big shepherd padded at his heel, ears flicking above the crowd's low hiss. Vidian merchants shouted prices in a dozen dialects, their green-tinted skin gleaming under the spaceport's ultraviolet lights. Cole's matte combat armor absorbed the glare instead of reflecting it, much like him take the punishment. Don't shine. He pushed through the throng until a small, musical voice stopped him. Excuse me, human sir. 3 girls stood half-hidden in the shadows of a bulkhead emerald skin. Lilac braids nodded in ceremonial loops that whispered royalty. Their dresses shimmered like spun glass, absurdly delicate for the grimy docks. Cole frowned. You lost. The tallest, barely to his chest, nodded with gravity beyond her years. Our guardian was meant to meet us at the central plaza. But we have strayed. He swept the alley with a soldier's instinct. Too many exits. Too many eyes. Anti-human graffiti glowed faintly on the walls. Wrong place. Wrong species. Where's your escort? She was separated when the crowd surged. Cole exhaled through his teeth. He should walk away. He'd done his share of saving things that didn't want to be saved. But these were children, and even enemies' children didn't deserve to die in an alley. Fine, he said, rubbing a calloused hand through sandy hair. I'll get you back. Stay close. Don't touch anything. Argo shifted to the rear. Silent sentinel. The girls fell in behind. Whisper soft. What are your names? Cole asked, as they moved. I am Talia, said the eldest. These are my sisters, Mira and Lena. Captain Cole Payne, he replied. This is Argo. The dog's tail flicked once. Acknowledging the introduction, Mira giggled. Reaching to stroke his fur, the laugh sounded strange against the distant hum of engines. Is he a warrior beast? Something like that. A dog. German shepherd. Has he fought? Cole's lips twitched. Yeah. He's seen things. They wound through the warrens toward the plaza, sidestepping the sectors still smoldering from the last battles. Security drones buzzed overhead, scanning heat signatures. Cole adjusted his pace, guiding the girls away from alleys marked by violet warning runes. Then the city shifted. Shops shuttered, vendors packed in silence. A low chime reverberated through the streets. What now? He muttered, catching a passing Vidian by the arm. Royal announcement, the alien whispered, eyes darting to the girls, all gathering suspended. The merchant vanished before Cole could question him. He turned to the sisters. You know anything about this? Talia's composure faltered. No, Captain. Her tone was too measured. Cole felt the prickling certainty of withheld truth. These weren't ordinary children. The delicate dresses, the braids of lineage, the way other Vidians looked away. Who exactly are you waiting for at the plaza? Before she could answer, the rhythmic thunder of armored boots rolled down the avenue. Barked orders in guttural Vidian filled the air. Talia's eyes widened. The Royal Guard. Please, we must not be found here. Fantastic. Cole scanned for cover and spotted a loading dock pillar. This way. They slipped into its shadow as the squad swept past, their crystalline armor reflecting the crimson sunset. The street emptied. Even the drones veered off to make room for authority. We'll wait here, Cole decided, sinking to the ground. Argo lay beside him, watchful but calm. The smallest girl approached shyly. May we sit with you? We are tired. He sighed. Sure. just quiet. To his surprise, they settled around him, as if drawn by gravity, small bodies pressed against cold armor. Alien warmth, meeting human heat. Within minutes, their breathing slowed. He glanced down at the fragile forms and muttered, "Babysitting. Perfect." Exhaustion kept in. The distant pulse of engines became lullaby. Just a few minutes, he told himself, head drooping, until the noise dies down. Cold metal kissed his throat. Human, do not move. He woke to find himself surrounded by 12 royal guards. Weapons leveled. Argo growled low. Hackles up. The ring of soldiers parted. A tall woman stepped forward, emerald skin a deeper hue than her daughter's. Eyes burning like green flame behind a filigree crown. Even without the headdress, Cole would have known her. Empress Valora, the unyielding, the warlord who had once scorched 3 Terran colonies, and then, against all logic, signed peace. And the 3 sleeping girls at his chest were her daughters. "Well," she said, voice melodic over steel, "this is certainly not what I expected to find." Cole eased the girls aside. Stood to attention. "Your Majesty, Captain Colpane, Terran Marine Corps. You possess something that belongs to me. Captain. With respect. Ma'am. They found me. Lost in the industrial district. I kept them safe." A flicker of concern crossed her face before duty froze it away. "And you decided to protect them. Admirable. Or perhaps reckless." Cole met her gaze evenly. Better reckless than dead children. Silence coiled like a drawn bow. Then, to everyone's shock, Valora laughed, a rich sound that made her guards glance up in disbelief. "You have courage. Captain Payne. Few speak so plainly to me. Fewer still earn my daughter's trust." Talia stirred, blinking. "Mother." The girls tumbled toward her. Valora knelt, armor whispering as she embraced them. The transformation from empress to mother softened her entirely. When she rose, her tone returned to command. "You will accompany us to the palace. The council will be interested in this. Coincidence? With respect, Your Majesty. I have orders. Already handled." She interrupted, amusement curling her lips. "Your Colonel Harris agreed most enthusiastically. Something about goodwill and unprecedented opportunity." Cole swore under his breath. Harris would sell his own boots for diplomatic credit. Valora's eyes gleamed. "You are now assigned as human cultural liaison to the Vidian court. My court. My daughters appear to approve." As the royal escort formed up, Cole glanced at the 3 little faces peeking from behind their mother's robes. Even Argo seemed to sigh in resignation. "Come, Captain Payne," Valora said. Her tone, equal parts invitation and command. "Welcome to your new post." The royal transport shimmered above the pad like a floating emerald. As he followed her aboard, the scent of her, a trace of jasmine mixed with static, brushed the edge of his senses. He had faced warlords, pirates, and vacuum itself. None had felt as dangerous as this. The Vidian royal palace wasn't a building so much as a verdict. Terraces of green-veined stone poured like frozen waterfalls down a mountainside, hemmed by bioluminescent gardens that woke at dusk. Servitors drifted through colonnades with the hush of tidewater. Courtiers smiled with the precision of cut glass. In a week, Captain Colpane learned 3 truths. The palace ran on ritual. Truth had edges. And Empress Valora was both. On the first morning, a protocol aide taught him how to greet, without offense, forehead to forehead. Then palm to palm. A soft press that acknowledged breath and heartbeat. On the second, a steward slid him a slender box, containing a formal jacket plated with bioceramic scales tinted to echo Valora's house color. On the third, she herself stood barefoot on a circle of inlaid jade and said, almost teasing, "Show me how humans make war look like certainty." They trained in a private arena open to the sky, the floor, a mosaic of concentric rings. Tracked footwork, every misstep lit faintly under his boots. Valora moved like a river that had learned ambition, weightless shifts. Blade angles, precise as equations. Cole answered with marine, fundamentals grounded base. Economy of motion. A guard that promised consequences. Too rigid. She said, circling. Power in your stance. Yes, but ceremony fights with witnesses. In my court, one must look indomitable and make the opponent choose humiliation before blood. Noted, Cole said, adjusting. But if humiliation fails, I prefer the opponent chooses the ground. Her laugh flashed quick and real. She stepped into his guard and without warning pressed her palm to his Vidian touch greeting. But closer, the way her daughters had leaned into him in that shadowed dock. Heat moved between their hands. She smelled faintly of bright flowers and staticky ozone. You generate remarkable warmth, she observed. Tone, light. Eyes not. An advantage on cold moons. Among others, he said before his sense of self-preservation caught up. They sparred again. Cole learned the tempo of her courtly style. How feints doubled as statements. How a turn of the wrist said, I see you, and a pivot said, I dismiss you. He mirrored just enough to show respect. He kept just enough marine to remain himself. Their blades kissed and slid apart in chimes. The palace breathed its routines around them. At dawn, the fracture gardens unfurled translucent leaves that magnified sunlight into mosaics. At noon, petitioners climbed the spiral of voices to argue cases before magistrates whose robes sang faint harmonics. At dusk, the bioluminescent flora woke like a scattered constellation. Courtiers watched Cole everywhere he went, with the tight curiosity of people certain the future had arrived uninvited. The fourth afternoon. Valora corrected his stance again, closer this time. Her breath cool at his neck. Flow. Captain, your people mistake hardness for strength. Water topples mountains eventually. The mosaic rings underfoot pulsed approval as his weight shifted. He didn't notice the threat until Argo did. The shepherd's head snapped toward the gardens. A low rumble rolling through his chest. A heartbeat. Later, the arena alarms lanced the air, two quick tones, perimeter breach, east quadrant. Valora's polish vanished like a mask cut free. The princesses, she said, already moving. Cole didn't ask permission. He took off at a sprint. Argo at heel. Valora pacing him, like a green-lit comet. The palace gardens were a living labyrinth archways, braided from tree-like vines. Carpets of soft moss that glowed underfoot. The study pavilion rose ahead in geometric elegance. Its glass facets reflecting a dozen versions of their approach. Then the sound hit the shriek of energy weapons. Not palace frequency. He rounded the last hedge and saw two royal guards sprawled smoking on the path. Armor blistered and cracked. Three figures in matte stealth suits advanced on the pavilion, where tutors and three small shapes huddled. Cole didn't think. The world narrowed to angles and timing. The nearest attacker pivoted toward him. Surprised to find a human instead of a courtier. Surprise is a weapon. Cole used it. He lunged, taking the man high. A shoulder check that folded stealth suit into stone. Elbow to throat. The attacker gagged. Dropped. A second raised a rifle. Argo. Cole snapped. Already moving. The dog blurred. Jaws, finding the arm above the gauntlet with surgical precision. The merc howled. The weapon clattered to moss. Cole rolled, scooped it mid-motion, and put 2 controlled pulses into the third attacker's shoulder and leg-disabling shots. Not kills. The rifle hummed in his hands. The recoil, a strange, smooth push. 30 seconds. Start to finish. His lungs burned pleasantly. His hands were steady. Royal guards flooded the path moments later. A wave of emerald armor locking the scene. The tutors sobbed a breath they'd been holding. The princess is alive. Unhurt burst from the pavilion. Talia reached him first. Face bally. Eyes bright. You moved like the human story nights. Mira checked his forearm, where a bolt had nicked and scorched the scales. You were harmed. Barely, Cole said. Breathing out. Argo. Steel key it up. Released and sat. Jaws flecked with greenish blood. Cole scratched him behind the ears. Good boy. Valora arrived a beat later with her personal guard. The air around her fizzed with fury and relief. She took in the bodies. The disarmed mercs. The intact daughters and Cole. Weapon held low. Not gloating. Her gaze sharpened into something speculative. Then softened into something dangerous in an entirely different way. You disobeyed protocol, she said evenly. For the benefit of the crowd. Royal Guard are responsible for the safety of my line. With respect, Cole answered, matching her tone. I don't leave children in the line of fire to wait for procedure. A whisper went through the gathered courtiers' shock at the audacity. Thin envy at the freedom to speak so. Valora turned so everyone could hear. While some of us debated process, or liaison, acted. Let it be recorded. Human decisiveness saved Vidian lives today. Guards thumped closed fists to breastplates in salute. Some of the salute landed on Cole. That night, the palace lights gentled to amber. Cole stood before Valora's study doors in dress blacks and the formal jacket she'd given him. He still wasn't used to the fabric's cool, subtly living feel. As if the scales remembered the creatures they'd once been. Argo stationed himself discreetly, outside on a velvet runner specifically laid to avoid paw prints on ceremonial silk. Inside, the study was a geometry of restraint glass walls overlooking the star-pierced capital, a table of some pale wood veined like ice, a wall of memory crystals humming softly with ancestral voices. Valora waited by the window, hair braided with thin strands of light. Without the crown, she looked more dangerous, somehow less armor. More intent. The attackers were Rexian mercenaries, she said, not bothering with preamble. Hired by those who would see our alliance fail. Gold is more convincing than scripture. Rexians weren't supposed to be taking sides in this sector, Cole said. He'd fought alongside and against them. Professionals. Mostly. Professionals with gaps in their morality. My security minister will insist it was an isolated incident. Her mouth made a shape that wasn't a smile. You have been under test since the docks. Captain Payne. I noticed, Cole said dryly. Did I pass? Exceedingly. You fight like a blade honed on grief. Yet, you stopped at disablement when death would have been easier. My court hides behind manners. You use them as cover to get close to the truth. He studied her silhouette against the window. The city's humming grid lit her edges in electric green. With respect, you're maestra. Optics matter to you. That public commendation wasn't for me. No, she said, amused. It was for every counselor recalculating how much it will cost to oppose me now that a human has drawn blood on my behalf. They stood in a charged quiet, close enough for her perfume to thread through his breathing, close enough that he could see fine. Almost invisible scars crossing the inside of her wrist, old fights, Old decisions. There is another human capacity I'm curious about, she said at last. Low-voiced. Gaze not leaving his. Your reputation for passion. That's not a diplomatic topic, Cole said, holding the line because someone had to. It is a personal one. She stepped nearer, lifted her hand palm up. An invitation in Vidian idiom. You may decline. He didn't take the hand. He covered it with his, turning it gently, so their palms met in the formal touch. It wasn't surrender. It was acknowledgement. Heat moved between them again. A current closing a circuit. The moment lengthened, poised to choose its future, and shattered as alarms knifed the quiet, not the perimeter. Keening this was a chattier trill. Almost embarrassed. Valora tapped a control. A translucent glyph bloomed in the air. The guard captain's voice arrived. Tight, with forced neutrality. Your Majesty. Palace-wide alarm triggered from the princess's suites. No active threat detected. We believe. Deliberate activation. Valora's eyes shut for a short, eloquent second that made her look exactly like the mother of 3 clever children. Deactivate. We are en route. The corridors reacted to her passage lights, brightening a fraction. Door sigils blooming open. Guards stood aside with the crispness of people trying very hard not to smile. At the princess's common room, they found chaos, arranged as innocence board tiles, scattered in concentric circles. A precarious rope fort between 2 chairs. 3 girls sitting cross-legged with entire faces, carefully blank. Mother, Talia said gravely. What a pleasant surprise. Captain Payne. She nodded at him like a diplomat twice her age. Valora arched an imperial brow. As surprising as an alarm that blacked out half the West Wing. We heard nothing. Mira offered, earning a microglance from her sisters that said too much. Argo trotted in on silent pause. Lena collapsed against his neck. Jiggling into 4. Perhaps it was a malfunction, Cole said, because someone had to throw the children a rope. Perhaps. Valora agreed in the tone of a woman who intended to find exactly whose clever fingers had learned to bypass a security panel. They held the silence for 1 beat. Too many. Talia crumpled first. It was my idea. Mira knew how to loop the sensor. Lena pushed the button. Valora pinched the bridge of her nose like a queen. Then looked at Cole like a co-conspirator. And why? She asked. Did you send the entire palace into practice lockdown? So, we could see if Captain Payne would come rescue us again. Mira said, honest as a sunrise. He's very efficient. And to see if you would come together. Lena piped, peeking out from Argo's ruff. You walked fast. Cole looked at the ceiling and prayed very briefly for a fresh Rexian raid. Valora's mouth tried very hard not to smile. Results achieved. Consequences now. 3 days without garden privileges. And tomorrow you will apologize to the head of security and explain your process. 3 solemn notes. 3 eyes already sparkling at the challenge of turning an apology into a seminar. They filed out under escort. In the corridor, the 2 adults stood shoulder to shoulder again. The hum of the palace knitting itself back together around them. Valora exhaled a laugh. She didn't let the servants hear. I apologize for my daughter's ethnographic curiosity, she said. They have decided you are a storybook knight. Knights apparently bring their own trouble. No apology needed. Cole said, they're bright, brave, too brave. They are a dynasty and children in the same breath. It is a dangerous combination. She turned to face him fully, her voice low again. For the record, Captain Vidians touched foreheads and palms to show affection. We are not ignorant of other methods. She stepped close enough that the fine hair at his temple lifted with her breath. Their foreheads touched Vidian kiss, a brief press that felt less like contact and more like shared gravity. When she drew back, her gaze was not a question anymore. "Good night, Captain Payne," she said, in a tone that promised nothing and implied much. "Good night, your Majesty." Back in his quarters, Argo dropped heavy on the rug with the profound sigh of a veteran dog who approved of developments but reserved judgment. Cole unbuckled the formal jacket, turned it over in his hands, and looked at the scorch where the Merc's glancing shot had kissed the scales earlier. The bioceramic had browned, then self-healed a fraction smart material, doing its best to forget. He wasn't sure he would forget. But for the first time since the treaty, he was very sure why he was here. Night in the Vidian Palace was a softer kind of war. The corridors glowed with quiet bioluminescence, light seeping like breath from stone. The air carried faint notes of jasmine and ozone from the Empress's gardens below. Cole Payne had learned the rhythms, now the guards' patrol rotations, the hush that fell across the court when the Empress retired, the whisper of her daughter's laughter echoing faintly from their private quarters. That evening, he'd been drafted into a new duty storyteller. The three princesses were waiting in their playroom, dressed in thin silken nightgowns that shimmered faintly under the low light. Argo sprawled on the floor like a massive, furry carpet. Cole sat cross-legged on the cushions. "So, what story tonight?" "Something human," said Talia, eyes bright. "About heroes." He nodded and began. Once upon a time, a human knight fought a dragon that breathed fire hot enough to melt ships. But he didn't slay it. He taught it peace. Mera tildelhehel. That doesn't sound like much of a victory. Sometimes peace is the hardest thing to win, Cole said softly. When the story ended, their eyelids drooped. But just as he reached the door, Talia's voice stopped him. "Captain Payne." "Yes." Her tone changed, no longer playful. "We heard something. In the gardens yesterday." He turned, alert. "What kind of something?" Mira bit her lip. Lord Naxos was talking to Lady Perth. He said the alliance was a disease. That soon, the Empire would be purified again. Purified. Talia repeated, the word foreign in her young mouth. And that the human problem would solve itself tonight. Cole's post still. "Did anyone see you?" They shook their heads. "We were in our secret tunnel." Lena added proudly. "Secret tunnel." Talia tugged his sleeve. "Behind the nursery bookshelf. It goes to the garden fountain. We found it last year." Cole knelt to their level. "You three just became my best intelligence officers. But from now on, no adventures. Promise me that." 3 solemn notes. He left them under guard, mind already spinning. A coup, an inside job. And if Naxos wanted purity? Then, the human liaison, sleeping under the Empress's roof, made the perfect scapegoat. An hour later, Cole crouched inside the tunnel. The ancient duct smelled of metal and cold air. Phosphorescent chalk marks glimmered faintly on the walls, tiny drawings of stars and hearts left by the girls. He smiled despite himself. Then he moved forward. Silent. The passage opened behind the fountain just as the princesses had said. Through the grate, he saw 2 figures, pacing the moonlit garden. Lord Naxos, tall and severe, and Lady Perth, her jeweled veil glinting faintly. The Rexian mercenaries were a useful distraction. Naxos said, his voice oily and low. "No. The human D's in her chambers. And the Empress with him. The peace dies too. The people will demand vengeance." "And the princesses?" Lady Perth asked. "Collateral. Their deaths will ensure succession passes to the council, our council." Cole's jaw tightened. He memorized every word, every detail. He backed away, retracing his route through the tunnel. The ventilation hum masked his movements, but his heart thundered loud enough to wake ghosts. 20 minutes later, he burst into the Empress's strategy chamber. Valora was mid-conference with her advisors, holographic charts hovering in the air. One look at his face and she dismissed the room. Report. Captain. He told her everything. The overheard plot, the timeline, the intended frame-up. As he spoke, Valora's expression shifted from fury to focus. So, she said finally, they plan to murder me, blame you, and collapse the alliance. Predictably. You're not surprised, Cole said. I've suspected Naxxus's loyalty for months, she admitted. But suspicion isn't proof. Now you have it, he said grimly. Her eyes softened just a fraction. Once again, Captain Payne, I owe my life to your inconvenient integrity. Cole straightened. Let's use their plan against them. Valora smiled a sharp, dangerous thing. Ah, the human proposes a trap. Bait them, Cole said. Let them think I'm where they expect me to be. Then, when they strike, they meet both of us instead. Her laughter was brief but real. I like the way you think, Captain. Preparations began instantly. Loyal guards replaced the night watch. The princesses were confined to their chambers under Argo's supervision, which they found only slightly more tolerable than house arrest. Before midnight, Cole and Valora stood in her private quarters, checking armor fittings. The plan was simple. She'd stage herself as asleep in her chambers, while he left visibly for a security patrol, then returned through the secret passage. Valora fastened the clasp of his ceremonial breastplate herself. Are you certain this will work? No, he admitted. But the best plans never survive contact with the enemy. She smiled faintly. Our species share that philosophy. Cole caught her hand. Your daughters are safe. Triple garde. Plus your canine sentinelle. I believe they prefer his company to mine. He earns his treats, Cole said with a grin. Their foreheads met a brief Vidian kiss. Warm and electric. For someone who didn't want to be my cultural liaison, she whispered. You've adapted well. I had motivation. Her eyes held his. Then let us make history again. Captain Payne. The palace clock chimed midnight. The plan unfolded. From his position behind the wall grate, Cole watched the door slide open. 4 silhouettes entered the minister, the lady, and 2 traitorous guards. Their weapons glowed faintly in the dark. Remember, Naxxus hissed. The human kills her. Then we kill him. They approached the bed. Valora's sleeping form, really, a combat dummy, lay still under silken sheets. Cole waited until Naxxus raised his weapon. I wouldn't do that if I were you, he said. Stepping through the secret panel, chows exploded. The dummy sat up, projector lights revealing its deception. The real Valora emerged from her antechamber, armor gleaming emerald and gold. Naxxus, she said, voice like cut glass. You disappoint me. You've betrayed the Empire, he spat. Polluted the bloodline with this human animal. Pure blood built an empire of ashes. Valora retorted. Diversity will build one that lasts. Cole leveled his sidearm. Drop it. For a heartbeat. It seemed Naxxus might surrender. Then his gaze flicked toward the far wall. The vent grate and realization dawned. He lunged. No. Cole moved faster than thought, diving between the minister's blade and the hidden princesses peeking from the tunnel. The energy sword seared across his shoulder, burning through layers of armor. Pain flared white-hot. Argo roared from the darkness. slamming into Nax's side, teeth sinking into his arm. The room erupted. Guards loyal to Valora stormed in. Energy bolts painted the walls with wild light. Lady Perth tried to flee through the passage, but found 3 small shapes blocking it: Talia, Mira, and Lena, bracing a heavy urn across the opening with surprising teamwork. Within moments, it was over. The traitors subdued. The children safe. Valora knelt beside Cole, her voice shaking for the first time. That was reckless. Human. He grinned through the pain, but effective. Her hand brushed the burned armor. You jumped in front of him. For them. For family. Cole said simply, behind her. The princesses hovered, wide-eyed and tearful. Is he going to be all right? Mother. Yes. Valora said, pressing a healing salve to the wound, though not for lack of trying to get himself killed. See, Lena whispered proudly. He's our knight. 1 month later, the Vidian royal palace no longer smelled of ozone and blood, but of celebration. Streamers of luminescent fabric draped the marble spires. The great banners of both the Vidian Empire and the Terran Confederacy hung side by side above the Grand Hall, 2 sigils that had once marked enemies, now intertwined in cautious unity. Cole Payne stood beside the throne dais in full ceremonial armor, now polished to a mirror sheen. The bioceramic plating had been repaired where Lord Naxxus's energy blade had scored it, though the faint scar still showed. A burn line that Valora had refused to erase. A reminder, she'd said, that peace always costs something. At his side sat Argo. Newly brushed and wearing a floral collar, the princesses had insisted upon. The shepherd was a hero in his own right, now half guardian, half court mascot. The courtiers whispered about him with reverent awe and faint unease. A fanfare blared from the balconies. The Empress entered, her gown woven from a million strands of refracted light. The 3 princesses followed in step, their braids coiled with silver threads. When Valora raised her hand, the room stilled. Today marks not merely the quelling of a coup, she said, voice resonating through the crystalline acoustics. It marks a promise to our children, to our allies, and to the stars themselves that we will not return to the darkness of war. Her gaze swept the crowd, then fixed on Cole. Captain Payne came to our world as a reluctant envoy. He became protector of my daughters, defender of my throne, and against all expectation partner in peace. A ripple of astonishment passed through the audience. Even the human delegation leaned forward, their diplomats exchanging quick, incredulous looks. Valora lifted a small crystalline tablet, etched with both Terran and Vidian script. By the laws of my ancestors, the monarch may choose a consort from any world, any species. Proven worthy through valor and loyalty, Captain Payne has satisfied every measure. She extended her hand. Cole stepped forward, boots echoing on the glass-like floor. When their palms met, the lights of the hall brightened the palace's AI, recognizing the gesture, recording it into history. The touch combined human handshake and Vidian vow, fingers entwined, foreheads inclined alliance, sealed in flesh and will. I present to you, Valora declared, Cole Payne royal consort, and imperial protector of the Vidian Empire. For a heartbeat. Silence. Then applause like thunder. The sound rose. A wave that shook the banners. The human envoys cheered openly. Vidian nobles joined with more restraint. But none dared withhold. Argo barked once, which the crowd took as approval. Cole bowed slightly to the assembly, then leaned toward Valora, voice low. Not bad for a guy who was just trying to help some lost kids. Her answering smile was small but warm. Those lost children have impeccable strategy. I suspect they planned this from the start. Later, the formalities dissolved into music and motion. The palace choir, half organic, half cybernetic, sang in harmonics that made the walls shimmer. Valora led Cole through the ancient rite of integration, hand upon the ancestral crystal, reciting the dual oath, one in Vidian, one in Terran Standard. When their palms touched the prism, it flared, projecting a hologram of the galaxy above their heads, two species constellations merging into one. Even the cynics in the court gasped. When the ritual ended, the Empress's daughters bounded up the dais, breaking all protocol. Lena hung from Cole's arm. Mira and Talia embraced Valora. Argo whined happily, circling them, his floral collar shedding petals like celebratory confetti. The courtier's rigid decorum cracked. Laughter rippled through the hall. Cameras captured the tableau. Alien mother, human father figure. 3 radiant girls, and one overly proud dog. It was messy, unscripted and perfect. As the crowd dispersed, Cole found a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons rose, silver or emerald. Valora joined him, the faint glow of her skin painting his armor in green light. "You know," he said, "back on Earth, we have a saying, the fiercest warriors make the gentlest parents. I think I finally understand it." Valora's eyes softened. "You have given my daughters safety. And me, possibility." She reached up, brushing the faint scar on his shoulder where the blade had struck. "Does it still hurt?" "Only when I breathe," he teased. "Then perhaps," she murmured, stepping closer. "I should ensure your breath remains shallow." Cole chuckled, but the sound died when she leaned in. Their foreheads touched the Vidian kiss of union. Her voice vibrated softly against his skin. "Our story began with mistrust. Let it end with faith." He tilted her chin upward, closing the distance between them in a very human kiss, an act that startled the stars, but not the Empress. For a heartbeat, the war between worlds dissolved into the simple truth of contact. The next morning, rumors spread through the galaxy like solar flares. The Terran captain who once fought the Vidian fleet had become the Empress's chosen. Commentators argued over politics and genetics. Poets wrote about destiny and peace. The children, meanwhile, cared for none of it. They raced through the palace gardens, dragging Argo behind them, laughing so loudly, even the statues seemed to smile. Cole watched from the terrace, one arm around Valora's waist. "Think they'll ever forgive us for making them famous?" he asked. "They will forgive," Valora said. "Then they will rule. And perhaps, someday, tell their own children about the human knight who taught an empire how to hope." In the Grand Portrait Hall, a new mosaic was unveiled. Emerald and bronze tiles forming the image of 3 small princesses curled against a human soldier's armored chest. Beneath it, the inscription shimmered in 2 languages. Peace was born not in treaties, but in the courage to protect what was once called the enemy. Cole smiled at the carving. "Guess that's me immortalized." Valora slipped her hand into his. "No, Captain Payne. That's us, the family we found in the ruins of war." And as the twin sons of Nixara rose over the palace spires, casting their blended light across the banners of both worlds, the Empire awoke to a new chapter, one where the fiercest warrior and the proudest queen built peace, not through conquest, but through love.